If you want to scale your business, you will need to hire people. Most businesses are actually limited by their leader itself, and they continue running the show. Hiring a person for a role doesn't mean that the role is taken care of and you are off the hook. There's a way actually to hire the right way and to scale your e-commerce business. Our clients, they range from solopreneurs to 300 plus employee companies. And this episode, we will share insights on how you can hire the right way. Welcome to the Ecommerce podcast. Today again with Dayu and myself, Simon. We're here to discuss more about how to hire in the right way. Let's start a bit of your experience, Dayu, with scaling teams. Have you ever scaled teams? What does it look like?
Simon. So I've been through the entire spectrum. I started a couple of businesses where literally started by myself with a couple of co-founders and scaled up to now we have Ecommerce. We have between 60 to 100 something employees, depending on the season. And even beyond that as well, back when I was a strategy consultant at BCG, I've actually consulted for large Fortune 500 companies up to $1 billion in terms of their organizational budget, in terms of their organizational design. And especially in those types of businesses, you're not only talking about hiring, but you're actually talking about scaling the entire organizational structure, including senior management, including partnerships with agencies, including third-party outsourcing vendors. So this is something that I also want to talk about as part of this idea of not just hiring for an e-commerce business, but actually scaling it, which goes actually beyond just hiring, but also thinking about in what situations do you actually think about partnering with someone or outsourcing to an agency. And Simon, you have a lot of experience as well. So let's talk about your background here.
Yeah, actually, I worked in multinationals mostly in the beginning, also a consulting company, which allowed me to be working at the site and some major multinationals. And it was always interesting for me. For me, the vibe was not so much I want to be working in a department. I don't want to be an expert on something. I want to be more a jack of all trades. When I moved to China, I started to run a smaller company, which we were at 4 at one point. Then we scaled to 20. And then actually we went back to 6. Then later I went to another company where we went scaled from 20 to 50 employees. And I did realize that if you want to scale your business, you need to create departments or you need to create functions of things. And one book helped me a lot. It's called E-Myth Revisited. It's from Michael E. Gerber. Very fascinated on how you as an entrepreneur, taking care of everything, you dissect your tasks that you have to do and you link it to a role, because as an entrepreneur, you're everything, your finance, your marketing, your HR, your everything, but you want to scale. So you want to take out these functions into roles and into jobs. And we have been doing that at Ecommerce as well, in creating visibility of what is expected, what are the responsibilities, what are the tasks. It helped me tremendously to just more scientifically look at how do I create that business and how do I make sure that my business sustains the level of excellence that I'm looking for. But yeah, I guess with scaling team with ecom, is it for ecom brands? Like how should they think about scaling in the first place?
Yeah, so scaling actually is a very good word that we're using here. And it's not just about e-commerce brands, but really any business out there. A fundamental principle that I think any entrepreneur or business leader should really know to heart is it's not about spending less time. It's not about so you as an entrepreneur can just hang out on the beach. I do really like the book, The 4-Hour Workweek, by the way. However, like the point of that book is not necessarily like your goal is to only work 4 hours per week. It is to make your time a lot more efficient so that you can then spend that time in other areas. And maybe it is to relax, right? But if you really want to scale a very successful, high value business in particularly rather competitive spaces like e-commerce, you have to work hard. No one wants to work for a lazy boss. No one wants to know that the only reason why they're hired is so that your boss can just hang out and be on the beach all the time. The most important thing for you as a leader, assuming you want to scale into a larger business, is focus where your value lies. And how do you leverage your time as much as possible and scale your team, scale your partners so that you can gain more leverage and help to grow your business so you can focus on the most important areas of your business. And a lot of times that means you're actually working harder than before you actually scaled up your business in itself. And what about you, Simon? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's also why one of the reasons I joined Ecommerce in the first place. It's also I'm a more I like the human touch. I like to actually engage with individuals, but it's also a very time consuming part to be able to get everyone on the same page and to get everything in a structure so that it runs smooth. And that is very time consuming, but I enjoy doing that. And for some individuals, it might be less of a good vibe for them. And they want to, in your case, focus more on a strategy. Where do you want to go long term? How can we create more higher LTV, long term value for our existing clients? What are crucial partners that we should cooperate with? So then you create the dynamics of what you find is value and how you brought the companies to a certain level, and what are the sources or resources that you need to be able to make it work and still continue the existing and maybe even improving the existing, but still be at the core of where you excel at. And I think that's something that, for me, the human touch, that's my style. But I learned as well that there needs to be boundaries. Human touch doesn't mean I give you everything you want to work with me. This is what I expect you to do. And I would like you to give you scope, and you can find your own interpretation of that scope. And let's figure out how we can do that in the best possible way. I'm not an expert on everything. I know a little bit about everything, but I need you to be the expert and help me and help the company to level up. So it's never a purpose of, we had a call today actually with our team where it also came up and say, it's not about you doing your job well, it's about our company doing well. And getting everyone on that same vision of where we're going to as a company is a time-consuming task that we have to realize as a leader, as an entrepreneur. Once you start hiring, 30% of your time is on your team, at least. That's some flexibility you have to schedule for. It's not like, I'm going to spend time with my team now, I have to do this. No, it's actually, your team is a representation of your company. And I think that's key. And that's what I really like, to be able to find where they're head at, how can I help them, how can I actually make sure our client experience is better, not by talking to me, but talking to the team. And then I become less obsolete, which then also gives me space to think and excel and sometimes take rest, because let's face it, we all need some rest sometimes. And to allow yourself to take that rest can be actually mind freeing in my case.
Yeah, great point, Simon. And one point that I really want to talk more about is this idea of your unique strength. You talked about your unique strength, and everyone out there has something of a unique strength about them, right? Both you and I have seen a lot of different e-commerce businesses, a lot of e-commerce leaders. A lot of the most successful ones, they do have something unique about them. They're uniquely good about something. I want to hear your perspective. What are some examples of some of the entrepreneurs that you've seen, particularly in e-commerce, or some of the clients we work with? What are some of their secret sauces that kind of really showcase why not only they're unique, but how do they turn that unique value, personal unique value, into something that's more unique for the business itself?
You and me both we came from a dropshipping experience, environment. I mean, our clients before were dropshippers. I like that journey because the dropshipping is being a first-time entrepreneur, figuring out what you're good at and what you like. So you saw some of them, they were chasing that monetary result, and they realized, I love advertising. I love being creative. I love running the logistics. I love whatever it is. And after 1 or 2 years, they moved into that and becoming a freelancer, an entrepreneur, creating great agencies, or whatever it is that followed afterwards. And that's actually also the journey. But there's another path that some other do, and not one is better than the other, is that I want to continue being an e-com. I want to continue building a D2C brand, but I need to get other people in my team. This is what I'm good at. This is what I'm less good at. Who do I know? How do I get in touch with that individual or that skill level? And then there's always a question, I think, and that's very tough. Like, should I hire? Should I outsource? Should I partner with someone? Or should I continue doing it myself? And I think that's also something that you have really strong, even scientifically, how to make that judgment. And that's something that I'm continuously learning from you as well on, okay, that makes sense. Let's execute. And But maybe you can share a bit more on that part.
Yeah, so actually, it's quite interesting that you brought up both of our dropshipping backgrounds. So for those who don't know, back in the day, I actually ran some of my own dropshipping stores. Those were the golden ages where you could just throw up a store, some random products or some ads, and you can actually make money. However, I personally realized that I really didn't like the creative aspects of marketing. And for a dropshipping business, if you don't like marketing, then it's really difficult to actually scale up to something unique. However, it was through that process that I realized, hey, I actually really like the logistics elements of it. I really like the operational elements of it, supply chain elements of it. Some of you might think it's boring, but hey, that's what excites me. And that's where I found myself to have very unique value add. And that's actually why I started Ecommerce. And I do want to emphasize, right? I mean, I think that not to say that you should not do what you're doing right now, but you also want to make sure before you scale too much that there is a very good match between what you actually enjoy doing, what you're actually good at, and where that value translates to something that's actually critical for the type of business that you're building. So I like to think about a general 2x2 matrix to frame how you think about these decisions. And by the way, those are who are more visual learners, we'll attach a link to it in the show notes or description below, depending on where you're seeing this. The matrix I'm thinking about is on two axes. One axis is what is your specific value? What you first want to do is to actually identify the components that are part of your business. So e-commerce, for example, you have marketing, you have supply chain fulfillment, etc. Right? You want to think about all the components that is actually necessary to run or scale your business, and you want to think about putting into this matrix. On the one axis is for each component, how good are you at that? How much unique specialty you bring to that? Are you the best marketer in the world? Are you the best operator in the world or within your community? And on the other axis is how critical is that specific component to your type of business. And it's going to vary a lot depending on the different businesses. And even within e-commerce or e-commerce retail or D2C, there's a lot of variance depending on your specific business model. We'll talk about more specific examples within each matrix, but I'll give you an example of how there could be even huge variance within an e-commerce brand. If you have a dropshipping store, it could be doing very successfully. You might have a specific value around your marketing strategy. You market really, really well. You drive traffic really profitably. And maybe your focus on the product itself, you want good quality products, I still think, right? But you're not really focusing on new product development, factory management, etc. That's just not a critical part of your business model. Whereas you take it to another extreme, think about Apple, for example. Apple, their entire brand is based on their innovative product development. If you think about Apple and Steve Jobs, that's what he was great at. He was great at innovation, and that's what drove Apple's success, and that was so critical to their business. Now let's get a little bit more specific. I think, Simon, let's kind of go through each of these boxes. I'll kind of describe what it is and what you should do about it, and maybe you can kind of talk about some examples that you actually see within e-commerce itself. Let's start with a box of something that you are great at, and it's also critical for the business itself. I mean, I think in e-commerce, probably stuff to do with marketing, right? But Simon, I want to kind of hear your thoughts on, especially what you see from the brands and clients that we work with.
Yeah, marketing is definitely a big one, but that's also something, if you find the right CMO, you can also hire for that position. It can even be R&D. I mean, Steve Jobs was heavily involved with that part because he's good at it, but he's loving it. There's a strong passion for that. But it could also be of the consumer experience. What are the touch points that you have and the actually interactions? How can I leverage these interactions more and can really go deep in building that relationship, especially when it comes to branding? I think Gary Vee is responding all his DMs in Instagram, something he could easily outsource and give him the template. This is how you reply to everything. He loves that engagement and he's good at it because that's part of his brand. I think for every entrepreneur to define as well, like What do I enjoy doing, and what I'm the sweet spot. I call it the sweet spot. Well, I listened to a podcast and they mentioned the sweet spot, something you're good at and something you are passionate for. Where's that crossing? If you're good in something, it normally also is something you're passionate about. And that something is also give you the leverage why you're succeeding with your business. Doesn't mean you have to double down on it, but you have to be aware of that part so that you can scale your business on other areas with help of others.
Yes, exactly. And really, you want to think about it from both sides. For your specific business model, the absolute most critical things you should be very good at, because otherwise there's no possible way that you can be competitive versus something that's similar. Steve Jobs, for example, with Apple, was a very unique innovator. He was lacking in some other areas, right? As everyone probably knows, but he was a great innovator in terms of product design. And Apple as a company, that was such a critical value and also culture that continues to today. And that's why he was a great fit. But on the other end as well, you as an entrepreneur, if you're actually passionate about something, you're going to enjoy doing it. Like, it's not going to feel as much like work. It's something that helps you wake up every day and work really, really hard. So in this bucket, and you want to be really thoughtful, like what actually lives in this bucket. This is something that you want to keep close to you as much as possible for as long as possible. Now, this changes when you start scaling into a larger company. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is something that you want to spend as much of your focus as possible. So it might be marketing strategy, it might be product development, whatever it is that makes your unique e-commerce business special. And you want to keep it as close to heart as possible. But everyone's time is limited. So this is why you got to consider the other buckets as well. What do you hire? What do you outsource? What do you partner out? So going to the next bucket, let's talk about something that is very critical to your business, but it's not something that you're particularly passionate about, not something you're particularly good at. And first, let's talk about the earlier stages of a business where maybe you're like a solo entrepreneur, we're a small team. To me, things like a fulfillment agency or like a 3PL or a supply chain agency, those fall within that bucket. Simon, I want to hear your thoughts on this. And again, it depends on the type of business you're running.
Besides the fulfillment and 3PL, my marketing agency can also be something you partner, but then it has to be a partnership, not an outsource. So they have to really represent your brand in the best possible way. It can also be a sourcing company, someone who's actually sourcing the products based on what you're looking for. It has to be an extension. So that's the key thing with the partnership, is allowing someone to be an extension of your business. And then they will become a partnership. And it doesn't mean sharing profit, but it is a transparent way of, this is where the profit is. And this is my service, and let's do this together, and then really take it as it goes. That for me is the partnership model, that it's creating a win-win. If you do well, I do well. That kind of philosophy. Very different than the other models in place.
Yeah, and the key point here is that these components are still critical to your business. They may not be the biggest drivers for growth, but there are certain things that are going to be very critical for your business. If you're running an e-commerce brand, the supply chain is half your business, I like to say, right? Even if you're not developing crazy new products, you still got to warehouse them. You still have to fulfill them. And, this is an area where, I'm close to, obviously, where even some of the largest companies in the world, they partner with specific big players in the supply chain. Taking Apple as an example, Foxconn, right? Foxconn, you might think it's more of an outsource agency, but no, Foxconn is actually one of Apple's closest partners. And they have a mutual understanding that they want to optimize their processes. So it's very different than just outsourcing out, similar to other parts of their supply chain. Their, chipset developers, for example. That is a big part of Apple's secret sauce. It is not the innovation itself, it's not the product design itself, right? However, without all of that, without the supply chain elements of what Apple does with its partners, you're never going to get the products out on time. It's never going to be actually to the quality that it's actually designed for. Okay, so those are the critical areas of your business. Now let's shift to, what about areas that you are very good at? However, it's not the most critical areas of your business. Now, I say that with a caveat. Everything in your business is still important, okay? Like you can't just leave out certain things that you find to be unimportant or boring. What if it's something you're good at, but it's not necessarily one of the most critical components of what drives your growth, but is necessary for your business? So, for example, maybe you are a great marketer across the entire stack. You're a great creative, you are a great media buyer, you understand Facebook ads in and out. For example, the pure technical aspects of Facebook ad buying, that is necessary for your business, but is not necessarily a critical differentiator between other brands that also have great face marketing. So this is where you actually want to hire out. And what I mean hire out is probably something that you do in terms of hiring out an actual internal team. This is why actually a lot of brands, they actually do hire internal media buyers. Or maybe they're contractors, but still like they are more meant to be part of the internal team. And this is where you as a leader think about how do you lead up that team. Maybe you drive the marketing strategy. However, then you have a team of executors that do the necessary things that are mentored by you. And potentially they level up and help take more of your burden in the future. And we'll talk about that in the scaling piece. It really is going to depend on the actual strategy of your business model. Is your business more driven by marketing? Is it more driven by something else? Is it more driven by product development?
I think to add on this is for the marketing part is the Shopify sellers, you want to create traffic, and having creatives, having videos, shorts is driving that traffic. And you would like to have as many options as possible because it's a game of testing what works, what doesn't work. You go through the scripts, through the video, seeing, okay, people sign off here. So this is the breaking point. This I need to fix. Let's test something else. If you would have outsourced to someone, you pay per video or per hour worked on it. But you want to have this continuous cycle of, I don't want to wait for anyone to finish it. I want someone to be on standby and say, the video is not working. Please adjust it here, here, and here. You know already where the issue might be, but you want to give the instructions so that someone can execute on it, and you start running the whole test again. That's the flexibility of having someone in-house because they are dedicated to you to be able to execute faster, but also at a higher scale. With testing, it's also about quantity. It's not always about quality because the quality is a result of testing enough. So that is something that is also very important to realize that when you make a distinction, which one do I actually want to have in-house and where do I need to have this flexibility to be able that I can control the output, but I don't have to make the output.
Yeah, exactly. And one point is very important here is, again, this is something that you're actually good at, which means that you have the ability to hire maybe a more junior internal team and actually be able to train them up and mentor them. And as you scale your business, then they can actually take more maybe strategic elements of those components as well. But that assumes that you have experience, that you're good at it. Now let's go to the final bucket where something that you're not particularly good at, you're not particularly passionate about, and it's not as critical to the growth of the business. And again, I emphasize not critical doesn't mean it's not important, right? It's just not necessarily one of the things that is critical, make or break to drive your business. And this is where things like, depending on your business, it might be something like customer service, right? Customer service is important for every single business. For some companies, great customer service is actually one of their top strategies. So Zappos is a great example of this. But I do think that for most companies out there, you just have to have good enough customer service, making sure that tickets are responded to, making sure that your customers are generally happy or at least not unhappy. But maybe you love customer service, but I know a lot of brands out there are not the most excited about something like customer service. Or another good example is something like accounting. You need accounting. It's not going to drive your growth, but you need accounting. So these are the type of components that you actually want to outsource out in the more traditional sense of outsourcing. Hire a VA agency, hire an accounting agency. I personally think, by the way, every e-commerce brand should have a CPA, right? Or tax experts, right? Again, not important for the growth of the company. However, you need that foundation. And this is exactly the areas that, especially if you don't like it, then you should outsource out, have a more expert just handle everything. and just making sure that your business is actually running and not breaking down.
Yeah, and I think that to play with it, like when is it time to hire, when is it time to outsource, when is it time to partner, when is it, what do I do myself? Do you have some more like tangible examples on how to shift from one to another, how to play with it? What's the right time? Because everyone is also like, yeah, I need to hire. What should I do? Outsource? What should I hire? What should I? Where should I partner?
Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's where it gets a little bit more complicated than this simple, oversimplified matrix. And it really depends on the stage and size of your business. So when you're just starting out as a solo entrepreneur, and a lot of, especially like dropshippers back in the day, just started by yourself. Right? This is when you really have to think about each of these different buckets relative to just yourself. You need to hire a fulfillment agency, okay? Because fulfillment is obviously important. Now, in terms of, you probably want to hire an accounting or like at least a cheap accountant because you need some kind of books, right? And then as you think about the stuff that you're good at, but it's not as critical, this is when you're by yourself and you want to save costs. You probably just want to kind of include those two buckets in one and just spend as much time as possible by yourself before you actually prove out your business. Now, when you actually do prove out your business, then you want to make sure that you are 100% or as much as possible focused on that area intersection of where you're the best at and where it's actually the most valuable for the business. So marketing strategy, creative strategy, probably at that time, you're still actually potentially creating your own ads. But maybe as part of that marketing, you, like Simon said, okay, like you set the marketing strategy, but you want someone efficient and relatively cost effectively cut you a bunch of different types of ads under your direction. So that's when you might hire either junior media buyer or just like a junior creative person, and you train them up into your own marketing style. And you think about like, what other partners do you actually need? Do you need like a sourcing partner? Do you need a finance partner? Now, finance is different than accounting, by the way. Finance is things like how do you creatively think about your cash flow and raise money, etc. Right? And in the outsourcing piece, maybe you still continue to say that, okay, customer service is very important. However, it's not my expertise. Then you scale up on customer service, you scale out other professional services. Now, as you scale up even more, this is where you're going to actually run out of time, even being in that one box of what you're good at and what's critical for the company. So actually, as you scale up into a larger company, maybe you're at like 10, 20 people or plus, you actually need to start creating layers under you. And you need to start creating a leadership structure under you, particularly in the hiring bucket. So even within that box of where your passion lies and what you're good at, you need to actually start breaking it down so that you can actually scale up your time. So let's say for marketing strategy, that's your forte. That's what you're best at. But you're going to run out of time in a day to think about marketing strategy, email strategy, creative strategy, social media strategy. So all that put into one is going to hinder you from actually scaling your business from, let's say, 7 to 8 figures, from, let's say, 5 people to 40, 50 people. And this is where I think Simon mentioned before is within even that specific bucket that you're good at, you might actually want to hire some kind of CMO. Right? Or some kind of email strategist. If you're the best at Facebook ad strategy, but email strategy is important, then you actually do want to actually further separate out that specific box where you're good at into layers, and those layers get higher and higher. I mean, like Fortune 500 companies with like 10,000 employees, essentially that's how they think about their organizational design at a very simple level, is at each layer, at each leadership level, they do actually adapt and kind of answer a very similar question of where do I hire and train internally? Where do I partner with a high-end agency? Where do I outsource into a third party or contractors?
Yeah, that's very fascinating. The journey from a solopreneur to a business owner. Because even at the highest level, you can hire your CEO. You don't have to be the CEO. You can hire that, right? So when you really think very simple, like how are companies created? For me, it helped a lot. So I have a business. okay, I need to have a finance because I need to have an accountant. If you have an e-com store, you need to have marketing. Sales, you don't really have a sales department because your marketing is driving the sales. But normally, sales and accounting are the start of your foundation. And then you start adding things. And at some point, we have one of our clients, the customer service is a team of 100 people. These 100 people are outsourced, but one person is managing it from them internally. So one customer service director is in-house managing the partner, so it's off the plate of the owner. Very, very important, those kind of things. And at some point you're going to reach, you need to hire a tech person, because having analytics, having insights in your business is going to help you, but you don't have the expertise to create the reports, to structure data from different sources, making sense out of it. And this is how it evolves. So then suddenly you have an IT department. And then you're going to have probably, besides marketing, finance, IT, you're going to have a logistics or maybe procurement, buying the goods. Someone who's actually visiting the factories or maintaining the relationships with the factories. And then you're like, I have so many people now. I need to have an HR because I don't have time for interviewing people and managing everyone and making sure everything is in protocol, especially when you have a global team where local requirements and geographics, holidays, everything. This is something that evolves. It's not something to be scared of, but it's just how did one solopreneur get to a 10,000 person company is by creating that structure bit by bit by bit by bit. And that's also the journey that we see. And I think it's very exciting to see this journey. It can be sometimes a little bit scary, but you also have to realize the way I looked at it, having 20 people in my team, and 20 is, I think is not a lot, but still for me, what felt a lot going from 0 to 20 is there are 20 families relying on me to be fed every day. I find that as inspiring to be able to actually help these families go to the next level and these individuals to go to the next level. So it's always about perspective. Don't be scared about it. And also don't be scared of making the wrong hiring mistake or maybe hiring instead of outsourcing. Play with it, but just be very aware of where is your time saving. And if you want to really go to the basics, write down what is it on your daily base, give it a grade. What do you like? What takes a lot of time? Put these axes basically, like what are you good at and what is critical? And then after, behind each activity or task, you can even put a number there and see what scores. And then you will figure out, I need to outsource that. I need to hire here. I need to partner here. I need to do it myself. All of these. I really download the matrix. I think it will help. I also had to draw it out myself to say like, okay, yes, this is actually makes sense. If I'm a visual person, I enjoy seeing it, the matrix itself. And we really hope this is gonna help you to structure your business and put it at scale. And it doesn't solely rely on you. It relies on the team members and the vision that you put out there.
So the simple answer is that there's no simple answer to hiring or scaling your business. It is difficult. In a way, it's meant to be difficult. One thing that you just mentioned that really jives to me is as you build a business, you actually have more responsibility. You have more responsibility to your customers. More importantly, you have a responsibility for the people that you hire, for the agencies that you work with, the people that you partner with. And trust me, the pressure goes up as you grow your company. Nothing is ever perfect. And this is why you as either an entrepreneur or maybe you're a business leader scaling right now, this is why it's so important to be thoughtful about this process. It's not just about who should I hire. It's about what components are you actually trying to fill resourcing for? When does it make sense to actually hire? What is the right type of hire? What are the right type of partners? And you have to keep thinking about that. Layer by layer. This is a never-ending process. You have to keep thinking about it. And, sometimes if you scale enough, you want to enable your leadership to also think about the same kind of process and layer down as well. And one other important thing is you got to be honest with yourself. You have to be extremely transparent, honest with yourself, what you're actually good at, where you're actually not as good at. And that is so important. Be very honest where your gaps are. Be very clear on if those gaps are important to your business, and therefore you really need to find the right partner. And it might be a partner agency, or you might need a co-founder, right? If you're in an e-commerce business where operations is extremely important and you are very creative, then you might actually need to find a co-founder or a COO to complement you. which are expensive, right? And partners are expensive, but you have to be honest with yourself. And once you get past that initial stages of a solo entrepreneur or a startup, the stakes are much higher, and it becomes ever more important for you to think about this in the right way and resource the right way.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Let us know your takeaway and send it to us in any of our social media. We want to see you win. And we truly hope that this will help you create an impact further than just your personal life. And the only way to do that is to scale your team and to scale your reach. Share this podcast if you think it's valuable, anyone that needs to hear it. Really appreciate you listening till the end, till the next episode.